Hello there. Let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do here. I'm going to be telling you about what happened in Holland. Basically, Frank has already said, we've ran a little bit of a campaign over the past half year. We've only been at it since July, publicly, a couple months in preparation. I will detail basically, first I'll talk a little bit about black box voting, why it's bad. I don't think I need to spend more than one slide, and I don't think I have more than one slide on that. There will be lots of discussion, probably there will be people disagreeing, there will be people thinking they have a better system which does work, but we can do that afterwards. It's much more fun to do that in the discussion. Overall, I'll be clicking through the slides rather quickly, because that's what I really am mostly here for, is discussion and trying to set things up and trying to work out what we're going to do next. It's a little bit of a big crowd, but I really like to strategize, really like to sort of get together and figure out what we're going to do. First, I'm going to describe a little bit the situation we found. Then I'm going to be talking about what we did, sort of the events in Holland of 2006, the methods we used, the things we learned, sort of go in between the timeline, but it's rather chronologic. And then I'll talk a little bit about what sort of random thoughts about what we've learned afterwards, sort of reflect on what to other campaigns, to other countries, and possibly see where we go from there. And also try to actively get you to do stuff. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do, share what we've learned. We've had a very, very large amount of fun. In fact, I've had more fun over the past 6 months than I've probably had in the years before. And hopefully I can motivate some of you to spend some time doing activism, whatever activism, changing the world, because it can be so much fun. Especially if you're doing it with a little bit of humor, and if you're doing it in a way that you can actually win. And I'm going to go through a lot of the things we've learned, also hopefully turning some of you into anti-black box voting activists, if you aren't already, in your Bundesland or in your nation state or whatever, wherever you're at. This is a formal definition of black box voting: any voting system in which the mechanisms for recording and/or tabulating the vote are hidden from the voter, and/or the mechanism lacks a tangible record of the vote cast. I think Ulrich has already been through this. Who here has been to Ulrich's talk? Yeah, okay, not even half. Okay, then I should get into it a little bit. There is a class of voting machines out there, like the one that's standing here, the same one that is in use, or a very minorly modified version that is in use in large parts of Germany. And that voting machine does not keep any record of the vote other than a software count. And we think that's bad for a number of reasons, mostly because you trust a whole chain of people and organizations with the count of that vote. The manufacturer, whoever stored the machine, whoever has once held the machine, a host of parties dealing with the machine. I'll talk a little bit about how we got here and how I got to care about this issue and how a lot of other people got to care about this issue. And one of the main points is the USA, is the dirty elections there. Now USA elections have always been dirty. I wasn't so much informed of this. I knew the popular culture aspects of it, the Chicago elections, but US elections have always been very dirty. Voter suppression, meaning making sure that your adversaries' people can't get to the polling stations. Most widely known because in the US there's huge lines for sort of the urban black population that wants to vote, because there's only one voting machine or 10 voting machines for 1 million people. And then in the richer white suburbs, there's like one voting machine per person almost. And a lot of this happens, and they redo the lines of the districts to make sure that whoever is in power stays in power. So there's very dirty elections in the US, and these dirty elections have been there long before voting machine technology. But we've all seen the 2000 Florida election, the lot of brouhaha about paper cards and figuring out where the punch went. And as a reaction to that, the US Congress passed the Helping America Vote Act, or HAVA. And what HAVA did is designate about $3.5 billion for all the states and all the counties, because voting is organized on a county level, for all the counties to basically buy voting machines. And to buy them so quickly, I think all orders had to be signed by summer 2007, I think. So buying them so quickly that nobody had a chance to look at this technology, nobody could ask any questions, and the money was free for the counties anyway. So basically all of America now bought voting machines, or a lot of America now bought voting machines. Then there's the whole controversy. There's organizations in America, the most well-known is Black Box Voting, but there's a whole host of organizations in America that deal with voting machine technology. Then there was the 2004 Bush-Kerry race, which saw a lot of irregularities in Ohio, in Florida, and in 2006, but of course, this was after our campaign, there was the Florida 13, the district where thousands and thousands of votes, I think 18,000 votes were lost because of a voting machine error, quote unquote. Then there's also Ireland, which is important in Holland because Ireland bought 50 million euros worth of Dutch voting equipment and then studied it and decided never to use it. So those 50 million euros worth of machines, we personally think the kickbacks were already paid. So, but these 50 million euros worth of machines are sitting in some army barracks in Ireland, probably never to be used. There are some in government that still claim, yes, we're going to be using them next year, really. But there's an Irish campaign very much like ours called the Irish Citizens for Trustworthy E-Voting. And they've done a really good job of pointing out where the flaws are, where the logical errors are in trusting one of these machines in keeping the count, and why that system is much worse than anything they've had before. And the Irish, mind you, have a hellishly complex counting system where everybody casts 3 votes and the votes have an order, so you vote for the first preference, then the second, then the third, and then the counting is done in multiple rounds, and if you don't get past a certain hurdle in the first count, then everything's recounted and reshuffled and restacked. So they have a hugely complicated system. In 2004, I remember reading the technical reports on the NAIDAP machine and learning about my own country's voting system more than I had ever been able to find out, because I had tried a little bit, more than I had ever been able to find out by asking NAIDAP, the manufacturers, or by asking TNO, the Dutch institution that tests these machines, that certifies them. And the Irish reports also explicitly mentioned, well, listen, anybody can just change the EEPROMs in this thing, can just change the software, and then it would run any software you want. In Holland, elections are very simple. I'll paint a little bit the Dutch sort of landscape. Elections are very simple. There's only 1 vote per election, no citizen initiatives, very few referenda, never many elections. Here's a list of some of the actors. There's the Ministry of the Interior. It's a little bit of a complicated situation that I won't bother you with too much, but there's actually 2 ministers at the Ministry of the Interior, and one is the Minister for Government Renewal and Colonies, although we're not calling them colonies anymore. So that's the responsible minister, but it's the Ministry of the Interior. Then there's Kiesraad, a little bit like the German Bundeswahlleiter. And they do publish the results for national elections, but they don't actually organize the election. The Ministry of the Interior does, so it's a little bit of a different structure. Then there's Brightside, formerly called TNO-ITSEF, before that called TNO, which is the testing institute. Just a regular commercial company. There's no state involvement whatsoever. And then there's the voting machine manufacturers, in our case NAIDAP and SDU. And of course, the elections themselves are organized by the municipalities. So the government can provide guidelines and legislation, but the actual responsibility for the vote is with the municipalities. Then there's a bunch of legislation. There's the Constitution, which says basically elections have to be fair and honest, and they have to be by secret ballot and proportional representation, but don't go into details. There's the election law, a little bit like the German situation. Then there's the election order. The election law basically has just one or two paragraphs which say that you can also do it differently, and in that case, everything that applies to pieces of paper doesn't apply anymore. But then the minister must make an order for that to be legal, and then that order is the election order, and underneath that is the approval regulations, which the minister can just change at the stroke of a pen. And that the approval regulations, that's where it says what the voting machine should be. Very, very similar to the German situation. Company formerly known as TNO and TNO itself now called Brightside. And that testing doesn't happen at the order of government, it happens at the order of the companies that want to be certified to have their machine ready for the Dutch market. So this company doesn't have a client relation at all with the government. They have no responsibility towards the government, their only responsibility is towards the voting machine company. They have to certify that it matches the regulations. Now these regulations say everything about environmental factors, how much shock should it resist, vibration, you must be able to spill a glass of water on it and it should still function, it should never shock you electrically. It can shock you in many other ways, but not electrically. The buttons have to be of a certain size and readability. There's all sorts of user interface specifications in those regulations. But the entire concept of somebody trying to steal votes doesn't appear. Computer security doesn't appear. That whole concept is absent, as if nobody would ever want that. So protection against whatever manipulation is left up to the manufacturers. As I said, there's two manufacturers. There's NADAP. They've made a couple of machines. The ES3A is still in use in some places. It's a slightly older version of this. ES3B, and then there's a new version of this, which I'll get into in a moment as we do the NADAP machines in more detail. But the newer machine is still a 68,000 based machine. It just uses surface mount parts because they couldn't get the through holes anymore. It's still the same machine that they built years and years ago. And then there's SDU. We'll get into a lot more NADAP further on, don't worry. SDU makes a machine that looks like this. It's actually an embedded Windows machine, as you'll soon see. They used to make something called the STEM PC. STEM is our word for vote or Wahl. A STEM PC is a regular PC with a touchscreen that was put up by the municipalities, and they had software licenses for a software package called RS Vote, which dealt with the touchscreen. It was just a Windows program that counted the votes. And now they've basically taken that RS Vote program, which was once built by Alcatel Belgium and then sold, and it's a piece of crap, everybody says. But that was then put in a box with an embedded motherboard, embedded PC, and that box is now called NuVote. Now NuVote is special because you can't buy a NuVote. You buy an election. No. What happens is the election is completely outsourced. The computers are owned by SDU. SDU trains your poll workers, the people in the polling stations. And SDU basically tells the city what the outcome was in the evening. So, and in the case of regional governments within cities, they wanted these governments because they couldn't install the software on all these different precincts, because there was all these different problems with, so they figured, why don't we just install Citrix and then these people can look at the results on our servers. So basically, this is completely outsourced. There's minimal involvement, if any, by city officials. So it's really, really easy if you're a city official. You just call SDU. Now, SDU is our former state printing press. It's a little bit like the Verselbständigte Bundesdruckerei. And they got into this business because they used to make all the forms used for elections. So they used to really, as their publishing business, they used to print stuff for elections. That's how they got here. As I said, it's Windows PC running Windows XP, and it has a built-in GPRS wireless modem, of course.